We are live.
Hi everyone. Welcome to the playing with GitHub Action session with Prem Kumar with us and little bit of introduction of Prem. So Prem is a implementation engineer at GitHub and he's been in the DevOps team at GitHub. And for the hackathon Hack Jaipur is a week long of hackathon with 2 days of main hackathon. We are sponsored by MLH and as well as other sponsors. So do participate in the hackathon. And in the workshop, you will be learning about GitHub Action, what they are, and how you can make your own. Okay, next to you, Prem.
All right, thanks. Can you all hear me clear? Mayank, is it
Yeah,
good?
Yep, yep. Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
All right. So welcome everyone. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Um, Today we're going to talk about GitHub Actions. For I know I'm really honored to be invited to speak in your Hack Jaipur hackathon. And as mentioned by Mayank, this is me. My name is Prem. I'm an implementation engineer with GitHub. This is how you could reach me, or you could follow my profile on GitHub. And without delaying, I would like to get into the agenda. So for today's session, where we learn about GitHub Actions, I would like to first give you an overview of what your prerequisites, the foundation knowledge that you need, and then we will move on to learn the core concepts of GitHub Actions. Based on that, what we could do is go through a demo to explain how you can consume and use a GitHub action. If time permits, I could also quickly very show you folks on how you can build a GitHub action from scratch and where you can go and look for the information that you need. All right. So let's go with the overview. So the scope of the workshop is going to be level 100. So when I discussed with the hackathon team, they say that it's going to be more on sophomore students. So a beginner level would be good enough. So that's where the context is going to be. But the discussion would be around how you would be using GitHub Actions inside of a repository that you would be creating and maintaining. Right. We will also take a look at the differentiation between what is a workflow and what is a GitHub action. All right. And then we will take a look at all the different pieces and put them together in a demo session. Right. Right. The foundation knowledge that you need to have in any development, especially when you're talking about GitHub Actions or building a Probot application. I believe Jason's going to be talking about Probot applications later. So having the foundation knowledge of understanding what is an event, how would you interact with it in GitHub, and what are the APIs that you could use is really very important. So whenever I'm going to speak about actions or Probot applications, always go back to the foundation and think the loop, right? What do I mean by the loop is pretty much the starting point is going to be your webhooks. All right. So GitHub is going to send a payload to any web servers that is configured and integrated with GitHub, where it listens to specific payloads being dispatched from GitHub whenever an event happens. All right. So this is the first loop. All right. So this is your starting point, and then to close the loop, or before that, if you want to know more information on the webhooks, you could go into this particular URL, https developer.github.com/webhooks. And in that page, you get to read a little bit more on the different types of events that we have that can trigger a webhook, the payload data that's going to be sent across. And if you want to ping for a certain event, this is where you can also get more information on understanding how webhooks are. So this is your starting point of your loop, right? And from the webhooks, remember it's going to be triggered or payload's going to be dispatched based on the number of events that we have. And in the same website, you get to see all of the different 45 events that we have. All right. Based on this event, you would be able to build logic to react or respond appropriately in your GitHub repositories to automate some of your workflows. To close the loop, you will need to use the GitHub API, right? So when we talk about API, this is going to be triggered or going to be interacting with any of the web servers that you have integrated with GitHub. It's going to consume and use the endpoints that we expose, and it can be used to automate any workflows or actions that you would like according to your requirement, right? So information on this REST API is provided through our documentation. For our REST API or REST flavor of the endpoints, it is known as version 3. And if you were to click and go into the link, you will have this documentation. And in this documentation, you have all of the different endpoints, objects, or you know, JSON data or response that you could get. So I will advise you to go here, take a look, understand how it's being used. Beyond version 3, which is the REST flavor, we also have GraphQL API. All right, this is version 4. All right, with version 4, we have all the different mutations, the query and the object. Based on this, you would be able to decide whether you want to use version 4 or version 3 in closing your loop. All right. So always remember you have the starting point, which is your webhook that needs to send a payload. The payload is going to be triggered based on specific events that happen on GitHub. And once the payload reaches the web server that you would like to have some automations on, you will need to consume certain points of our APIs to complete the loop by providing some automation or next steps, right? So with that foundation in place, let's take a look at what is GitHub Actions, right? So GitHub Actions is basically a open platform that provides you with development teams or developers like you folks the flexibility to create and automate software development lifecycle workflow, right? So this is the official definition. Let's move on into the core concept of your GitHub action. We will take a look at what GitHub action is from a technical lens. So we will see the configuration as a code. We will see what are the different elements or components that you need. We will look into what is the difference between an action and what is the difference between a workflow. All right. And then we will take a look at some visual models to help you better understand how these different components fit in together to build an automated DevOps pipeline for your GitHub repositories. So, in a nutshell, GitHub Actions is basically configuration as a code, which simply means that we're going to use YAML syntaxes to configure the logic and the amount of work that you could achieve by automating this configuration as a code that represents GitHub action is limitless, and it's bound to your creativity. So I think the graphic that you see on the slide deck, this really captures the actual essence of what you could achieve with the GitHub actions. All right. If you can think a specific workflow or automation, any ideas that you might have, depending on the events that we have, as well as the API endpoints that we have, you will be able to craft a very creative as well as a very complete workflow just using YAML syntaxes via GitHub Actions, right? In a nutshell, what it means is that you will have a repository. In that repository, you are going to introduce a infrastructure as a code, a YAML documentation or YAML file that is representing the workflow or the GitHub actions that you are going to be using. And based on that information, you will be able to keep track based on the runs of the action, all the different logs to see how it's running, whether it's passing or it's failing. If it's failing, you could drill down in and take a look at the log levels to see what has actually failed and is blocking in your GitHub Actions workflow, right? So very quickly, you have a repository. In that repository, for you to use in Actions, you need to add a workflow file. That's basically a YAML document. And through the YAML document, you'll be able to keep track of all the different runs that you would have triggered for your GitHub Actions. The biggest misconception or confusion that we have seen is that when we use the word actions and workflows, uh, folks tend to get a little bit confused because they use the term interchangeably. So to move forward from here, I would like to stress that, when I say an action, or when you talk about a GitHub action, it's one specific atomic unit that has one objective or one execution. Take, for example, this light bulb, right? So a GitHub action is basically a light bulb. A light bulb, what it does is it just gives you a light, right? It brightens up the room. Whereas a workflow is considered to be like a lamp, because in the lamp you have an on-off switch, which is a different component. You have a base that allows it to stand, and then you have a shade to make sure that the light is not too bright. All right. So when I talk about workflow, it simply means workflow can have multiple different actions combined together to define a CI or CD pipeline. All right. So the same concept of a leaf to a tree, a fork to a dinner table set. All right. So an action is basically one single atomic unit. A workflow is basically going to combine multiple different actions in your logic. How does the whole thing fit into one single picture? When we talk about GitHub Actions, you need to define the logic, the atomic logic that one specific action does. All right. So you have three flavors of actions, meaning you can build a GitHub action using either a Docker container, a JavaScript GitHub action, or a scripts action. All right. A scripts action is basically uh, running a shell command, or maybe if you have the access to the OctoKit library, you can also directly call API calls directly from your command line via these scripts, right? So an action is again a repository. You can define a action by Docker containers, a JavaScript action, or even direct scripts. To be able to use that action in your repository or in your workflow, you will need to provide a YAML file. And this YAML file needs to be in this specific folder. This is a special folder called .github/workflows. And in this folder, you can have multiple different YAML files representing different workflows that you would like to define as your CI or CD or automation process, right? When you trigger a workflow, what's going to happen is it's going to be loaded into a virtual environment, which we call runners. And there's two types of runners. You can use the runners from GitHub itself. Basically, the platform, the infrastructure of the platform is maintained by GitHub. Or if you say that you have your own self-hosted virtual environment, you could then connect via some configuration those VMs to run or execute the workflows or the actions that you have, right? So moving forward, keep these three different pictures in mind, because when you are using or when you're building a workflow, you will exactly know which category you are in, right? So in for me to summarize this three diagram, it would be as simple as I need to have a action defined in a repository. I need to pull it into the repository that I would like to use or consume the action. Whenever event happens, it's going to be triggered and it's going to be run in a virtual environment. And that virtual environment is called a runner. It could be either a GitHub hosted runner or it could be your own self-hosted runners, right? To summarize, you will first need to build an action. You will need to then consume the action. After consuming, or when it's being run, it's going to be executed in a virtual environment. So if you can have this picture engraved at the back of your mind while you're moving forward, understanding, looking for new actions, consuming or building your own actions is going to be a very straightforward experience, right? So in the YAML file, of course, you're going to have like the ID as well as some events on when should you trigger the workflow. You could create different jobs. You could provide some information on steps, and this YAML file is then going to be translated into the Actions tab as a log that you get to keep track of. So you have a direct representation over here. You can see that, based on the name, I get to see that this is a hello world. There is some jobs that I have configured in here. You get to see when it was last run. You get to download the log from here. It tells you what is the different runtime and also some output from your log information, right? So this is going to be really helpful for you to understand whether you're building or whether you're consuming an action and monitoring how it actually runs, right? So this is going to be useful for you to debug your GitHub actions that you're going to be using, right? All right, so it's enough of me talking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick demo. For this demonstration, what I would like you to do is, if you want to follow along, it's good. If you want to take a look at it, and then at the end, I'll give you a link on how you could complete the actions with your own self-paced. That's also fine, right? So let me copy this link. And I'm going to paste it in the chat. So Mayank or Nilesh, the host, if you could share the link that I just pasted in the chat window, would be really good, right? What's going to happen is in this repository, this is a template. I'm going to fork this repository into a organization, right? So if you folks are following along, what you could do is you could fork this repository into your own GitHub account, and then you can follow along with the instructions, right? So this is a repository which is basically representing a tic-tac-toe game. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to include a GitHub action, meaning I want to consume an available GitHub action. All right. And since this is a Node.js application, what I'm going to do is, do you folks have visual on my screen? Is this better? All right. Can somebody tell me if the Zoom is all right? Is it better? Do you have visuals? What about now? This is the best I have. I can't go any bigger from this, right? All right, cool. So in this repository, what I'm going to do is, this is a tic-tac-toe game. I would like to include a build and test for Node.js, right? So I'm going to go into the Actions tab, which is here. I'm going to click on the Actions tab and say that I would like to use a Node.js workflow, all right? So I'm going to click on set up this workflow. You can see that the name is node.js.yaml. So this is the infrastructure as code file. And you see that in here, I have the name of the workflow file, all right? And then I'm going to say that I would like to trigger the logic every time somebody pushes to the master branch, or every time somebody opens a pull request against the master branch. And in here, I have one single job where the job actually builds. And this build is actually going to run on the VM, the infrastructure that's hosted on GitHub. It's going to use the Ubuntu image. And what it's going to do is it's going to actually create a matrix to make sure that the build will work on version 10, 12, and 14. So in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove version 14. So I would only want to check version 10x and version 12. Right. Let me take a look at this. All right. So, and then in here, I also have steps. These steps tell me which GitHub actions I need to use, and then it's going to provide some extra information. And it says that it's going to set up the node. And in here, you can see that I'm basically running a script. I'm just doing an npm CI. I'm running a build, and I'm running a test. Right. So let's commit this code. Right. This is done here. It's good. Right. I'm going to say start commit. I'm going to say create Node.js YAML. Okay, I'm going to. All right, I need to make the screen a little bit bigger, smaller. So say propose a new file. Okay, I'm in here. This is fine. Say create pull request. And you can see that this is working fine. And the CI job is already kicking in. All right. This is a very simple example of we trying to use an existing action that was already built by the community. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this workflow a little bit more compartmentalized. So I want to break it down into a build job and then a test job. All right. So what I will do is I'm going to go back to the code tab. It's not in here yet, so let me just merge this pull request first. Just say merge this pull request, confirm the merge. Then I'm going to delete the branch. All right. Okay, so code. Mayank, did we share the HackJaipur repository link? So I see some comments on the chat.
Yes, sir. I have shared.
All right. Okay. All right. For the folks who are trying to follow along, you would be able to get the link from the chat. Yeah. All right. So here you can see that we already included the .github/workflows folder, and in that workflow folder we have a node.js.yaml file. And if you were to look at the file, it's a very simple, straightforward YAML syntax that tells you when this workflow should run, what are the different jobs that is available. What I'm going to do next is I would like to make this a little bit more granular. So for that, I am going to edit this workflow file. Right, and in this workflow file, what I'm going to do is, let me bring this here. Okay. Do you folks still see my screen? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break out the jobs into a build and a test job, right? So I'm going to copy this and I am going to replace this whole thing in here, right? And I'm going to walk you through what I've just done. So under the jobs, what I've done is I added a separate job. And in this separate job, what it's going to do is it's going to run on a Ubuntu VM on GitHub, the virtual environment. And it has a couple of steps. There's two steps. The first steps is what it's going to do is basically it's going to use an action called checkout. This action, the logic is basically allowing us to use or consume the code inside of the repository that is triggering the run. I give it a name. And then I also say that what it should do is it should just do a npm install and npm run build inside of this VM, right? So once it does a build, what it's going to do is it's going to export out a build package for me, all right? So to be able to use that build package, I'm using another GitHub action, which is called action/upload artifact. What this does is it grabs the build output from this logic and then it uploads it into a location where we can consume through another action. All right. So I give it a name called Webpack, and then I say that it should be in the public path. Right. So this is the build action. Once the build action is completed, I also create another job called test. And here, notice that I say that for the test to run, we need the build job. So the build job is actually coming from here, right? And for this test to run, it's going to be requiring the build. It will run on, again, another Ubuntu VM image. And in here, I say that I would like to introduce a strategy, meaning I want to make sure that this particular build can run on a Linux-based machine as well as a Windows-based machine. All right. And again, I want to target Node version 14 as well as Node version 10. All right. So this is the strategy that I want. And the steps that are involved in the test job is that, again, it's going to use the checkout action, but this time it's going to use a download artifact logic or action to say that grab the output from the earlier job from this location, then use that particular job to test all of the different node versions in the different OS versions that I've defined in the strategy. What I need to test is basically do a npm install and npm test. All right. And I'm going to say that the environment is a continuous integration environment to be true. Right. So from the earlier step, what I've done is I've broken it up into two separate steps. One is the build, the other one is the test. Inside of this test, I specify the strategy. I want to make sure that the test or the tic-tac-toe game can run on a Linux-based machine with Node.js version 14, as well as a Linux-based machine which has a Node.js version 10. The same applies for the Windows version and the different Node versions that we can install on a Windows machine, right? Since I've done that change, I am going to commit it. So I'm going to say improve CI, right? And I'm going to say create a let's say for the purpose of time, I'm going to directly commit into a new branch. So propose the change. You can see that it's able to merge. I'm going to say create the pull request, and you will see that the build is running first. As soon as the build is completed, then the test job will be triggered, right? Okay, so let's wait for that. So if I click on the details tab here, it's going to bring me into the actions tab. Right? And you can see the action is basically doing a npm build of the game, which is built in a Node.js application. You can see the logs are running right now. As soon as it's done, you can see that the test is being triggered. So we have the Linux-based machine that needs to install Node.js version 14 as well as Node.js version 10. And then you have, for the Windows machine, it's the same matrix, right? So you can see that the build has run. Now the test is running, and the test, all of this test depends on the output from this build, all right? If I were to go back into the pull request, you will see that the job is running again here. So I see there is a question from Jojo. What does the action actually do? Does it automatically check our code? So Jojo, the actions that I've done here, there's a few actions. One is checking the code compiling it, making sure it works fine, and then it's going to run a test based on this criteria that we have just done, right? So let's wait for this particular job to complete. And you can see that now all the jobs, oops, is working fine. So we could merge this pull request. I'm just going to confirm the merge. Let's say delete the branch. And then you can see that this is just one simple example. And if I were to go into the Actions tab, from the Actions tab, you get to see the Node.js workflow that we just created, and then the different runs that it has. So if I were to click on the improve CI part, you would get to see all of the different tests, the log that has run. If you click on the test, it tells you all of the different steps that you have defined in your workflow file, right? So what has actually happened is, let me go back here. Yeah, so questions from the chat from Anand. We have to specify the test script. Yes, so you need to have a test script to be able to, just like any Node.js project, you need to have the test, build the test. Once you have that in there, then this particular workflow will work for you. And Jojo, yes, I think if there is no workflow pre-built, you can build your own workflow or action to actually compile an Android Studio code as well, right? So what we have done in the demonstration is basically there was an event that was happening on GitHub. So that event was me opening up a pull request, all right? So if you remember the foundation, the loop, this is where the webhook is going to send a payload, all right? So once that event has happened, it is going to trigger a workflow file, and this workflow file was our Node CI workflow file. That workflow file utilizes a couple of actions or scripts, and those actions were actually running in a virtual environment on the GitHub platform, right? So the repository contained one workflow file. In that workflow file, we had two different jobs. The first job was a build job that had a couple of steps, which was utilizing different actions. And the second job was a test that has different steps, and each of the steps was utilizing a single action. All right. So this is a visual representation of what we had just done in code. Moving a little bit more further, if you look at it from a infrastructure perspective, each of the workflow, or in the workflow file, we had two different jobs. Each of the jobs were actually running in different virtual environment. Because they are running in different separate virtual environment, if you would want to share the output from one job into another job, you will need to actually use this action called artifact that we just used earlier. So the artifact upload action, what it had done is when it was running, it's going to publish that build artifact into a environment, which is then downloaded through the download artifact action in the second job. All right. So how this looks like in code is basically here. You have one job, which is the build. It's using the actions upload artifact here. All right. And then you have the second job, which is the test. In the test, you say that you need the build job, and then it's basically using the download artifact to grab the information from the first build. All right. To make it a little bit more interesting, we provided a build matrix. All right. And with this build matrix, what's going to happen is it's going to test for the different operating systems that you have and the different node versions that you have. Right. So this is one specific workflow that is just doing a node CI workflow. What if I want to make a little bit more automations to this workflow where I want to add a label in the pull request to say that this was already approved, right? So for that, I'm going to go and create another demo. And this time, what I'm going to do is in the same repository, I'm going to go into the GitHub's workflow folder, see .github/workflow, and in here I'm going to create a new file. So here I'm going to say approval dash workflow.yaml, right? And I'm going to actually look for the internet uh, to see if somebody has created that action. So I do know that there is a pull reminder GitHub action. So this is the action that I want to use. All right. If I go into this repository, this person who's our colleague, they have created this action, and they say that for you to be able to use this action, these are the syntax that you need to paste in your own specific workflow file, right? And this action is going to be triggered every time a pull request review is done. All right. So what I will do is first go in here, paste the code, and you can see that this is the name of the action. It's going to be triggered on this event. Excuse me. It only has one job, and the job is given a name called label when approved. It's going to run on this VM. It only has one step. It says that use the logic that is in this repository. These are the different variables or configuration file that I'm passing in there, right? So I say that create an approval workflow, and then I commit it into a separate branch. And I'm going to create a pull request. All right. And you see that in this pull request, the automation is being triggered from our earlier workflow. While this workflow is being triggered, what I'm going to do is I need someone to give an approval for this pull request. So if you see, I am not able to approve my own pull request. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Mayank in here as a collaborator in this repository. So I say invite teams. I'm going to say hero Mayank. There you go. And I'm going to give Mayank the maintain role, right? So Mayank, I think you should have got an invitation. Could you please let me know if you have got the invitation and you get to access this pull request?
Yeah, Prem, I have the access.
All right. Okay. All right. So while the job is still running, I will give you a cue on when you can actually provide the approval for me, right? In the meantime, I'll take a look at if there's any questions, right? The link is shared. Folks are saying hi, so hello back. And then let's see. Okay. Let's just click on refresh. So this should be running right now. Jobs are running. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the setting tab while that is still running. I'm going to go and create some branch protection rule so that when the rule is satisfied, only then I will be allowed to merge into the master branch. I'm going to say require pull request review. Just need one pull request review here. and then I'm going to say it requires a status check, and then I'm going to say it needs a bill. It needs to pass all of these tests, right? And then I'm going to say create. Okay, it's done. Did I save change? Awesome. Let's go back to the pull request, and in here, let's click on here. So you can see that all of the tests has passed from the earlier workflow, but I'm actually blocked because I created a setting to say that it requires one approving review. And over here, you can see that there's no reviewers and there's no label that's being attached. So the second approval workflow that I did will require someone to give me an approval. So Mayank, since I have added you as an approver, could you please approve the workflow?
Sure, Prem.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So you can see that Mayank has provided the approval for me, right? And what's going to happen is once this is working, let's see on the Actions tab, you can see that the second workflow that we just added is being triggered, right? So it says it's running and it's going to create a label for us. Label when approved, it's all done. Let's go back into the pull request, and you see that there is a label called approve being added to the pull request. And then you will see that the GitHub Actions bot pretty much added the approval label, right? So I can go ahead and merge this pull request now. Yeah, say confirm merge. I delete the branch. And then if I were to go back into my code tab, you will be able to see that there is under the GitHub workflows, there is two separate workflows, a Node CI as well as an approval workflow. All right. So what has happened is I let me get back into the full screen mode. So there's another question by Anand. I think where does Travis CI or Jenkins come into this workflow? You could take a look at the marketplace and see if Travis or Jenkins have built some actions workflow, right? But this is just a separate actions workflow that we have to that you could directly have inside of your repositories in one GitHub platform, right? So what I've done in the second demo is basically we had the first build workflow, which is building the Node.js application and running some tests in different environments. And then the second approval workflow, what it does was it is just adding a label every time somebody gives an approval to the pull request, right? So it's, you know, the message that I'm trying to give here is that you could add as many workflows that you need according to your requirement or even your creativity to automate any of the development workflows that you have in your repositories. So this is not only bound to CI or CD, it could be any automation that you need as a requirement, right? So this was the outcome from the second demo. We have a separate YAML file for approval, and the logic of the YAML file is basically listed in here. A little bit of bonus. When we talk about GitHub Actions, you can actually migrate your existing Jenkins or different pipelines into Actions, GitHub Actions. So this is an example of a Jenkins pipeline. You could convert this into a GitHub Actions workflow with this particular steps, all right? And you can also build the same matrix, have a strategy defined in there, and also you could run some specific scripts that you would like, right? Uh, if you would like to, go through and learn GitHub Actions on a step-by-step basis, I would recommend you going into the Learning Lab from GitHub. Excuse me. This is the web URL. This is lab.github.com. You could sign in with your github.com handle, and from there, you would be able to register and look for this called GitHub Actions Continuous Integration. So this is basically a bot-led learning. You will be able to follow step by step the demonstration that I have given to you folks at your own pace, right? Some additional resources on why actions. GitHub Actions, as you saw, we on GitHub, there's about 50 million developers. There are many different developers building your own actions. If you want to reuse those actions, you could always go to the marketplace, take a look at the different repositories that are in there, and use it in your own repositories to benefit. So it's instead of reinventing the wheel, you are leveraging some logic that some other developers have built from different parts of the world, right? It's an open and component based design, so you get to also take a look at the code and see how it executes. It has monitoring capabilities through the logs. It's all going to be on one single platform, so it's easy and going to save you a lot of context switching. It's OS agnostic. Security is built in directly because it's on the GitHub platform, and it uses our open API standard to drive the different actions. So this is going back to the foundation where you have the loop based on triggers, dispatching of webhook payload. You respond according to build a automation that you would like, right? There are some resources and links. I believe the organizers will be helping to share this or paste this link in the YouTube video or the streaming link under the comment section. These are folks that I'd like to give a shout out. Stefan, Rex, I think Mayank for having me invited to speak, and of course the hackathon team and you folks as participants for making time to be here in your lovely evening. Right. With that, I think Mayank, we can go into a Q&A session.
Yeah. So if anyone has a question, do feel free to ask in the comment section, and Prem will be happy to answer them. It was a pleasure hosting
Prem,
you here,
I guess,
and
uh, uh,
Yeah,
I
I
guess,
think.
Prem, there are some questions
so
in
much
the
about
comment
GitHub
section.
Actions,
So,
and they will show.
yeah.
Sorry, what was that, Mayank? I didn't get that.
Prem, there are some questions in the comment section, so you can answer them, like if you want to.
Yeah, so I'm going through that now. So searching for code blocks on machine learning. So Master Crafter 9 ball. Are you looking specific machine learning on actions? Is that the ask or? Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? I don't see. I think I've answered most of those.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you have any questions, do feel free to comment them in the live chat.
And we do have a Discord channel. And if you want to ask questions on our Discord channel, feel free to drop. I'm just sharing the link in the chat section. So I guess there are no more questions, Prem. And
Okay.
thank you so much for taking out your time for HackJaipur
No
and
problem.
giving
Pleasure is
the
all mine.
wonderful session or get an action. Same here, Prem.
Thank you, Prem, for joining us.
So,
And it all started with a GitHub Action workshop.
Yeah.
So
All
we'll
right.
be
Thanks.
looking.
Thank you, Mayank, for
Yeah.
having me.
Okay. So Rishabh, we can
okay,
end the
let's,
session.
yeah, we can wrap the session.
All
Thanks,
right.
Prem, once again.
All right.
Bye.
Good luck, folks. Bye.
Bye.